Hello, welcome to tonight's very special episode of the Group Therapy Podcast. As you can see, I'm by myself tonight, so that's why it's very special. It's very special because I'm the only person on this episode, so I'm calling it group, but there's no group. So, we had plans for another episode, but due to some issues, we had to reschedule. So hopefully everything will be better next week. Probably going to do a short episode today just to give you a heads up. So, today's episode, I just recently watched the Last BlockBuster on on Netflix. It's funny because watching this, because I come from an area, we didn't have a Blockbuster. Here in Piqua, we had everything pretty much but Blockbuster, I think. Blockbuster, I think the closest one we had was Huber, I believe. We had, Mammoth Video in Sydney. We had Family Video. We had Hollywood Video, which I worked at. We had, I think that's it. I don't think we had any other chains. Lots of local, though. Like we had First Choice Video, Front Row Video. We had Home Video Ventures, Diamond Video, Showcase Video. Every grocery store had a video store in it, which I did when I worked at the grocery store. I also did stuff for the video store part of the grocery store. But I want to tell, because I always have people, we tell these stories and stuff like that about the stupid stuff that happened while we were working at the video store. So I'm just going to give you a couple of little stories. The sheer nonsense of what you would go through in the video store industry, because you get the people who think that you're there just to serve them. That is not true in any way, shape, or form. Because literally, if you were good to us, we were good to you. You had people, I'm not going to give any names or nothing like that, so don't think that I want to, if you live in Piqua, that you're going to know, hey, I knew that guy. No, because it's not going to happen. So we would have customers who would come in, every Tuesday, movies dropped. And at one point, the Hollywood Video that I worked at in Troy, I worked at the one in Troy, and I worked at the one in Piqua. Piqua was the last 99-cent video rental store in the nation at one point. And people would go nuts because, they would literally, when Troy went back up to full price, they would immediately run up to us so they could get their movies at 99 cents instead of $3.49 a day. Because, we were 5 nights for 99 cents. So, every Tuesday, you would have these people roll in, and we were supposed to only rent 10 movies out. But you would have people come in, and they would rent every new release, knowing full well there is no way that they could watch all these movies in the 5 days that they got. And we had people that we just put, we had a little thing on there. We'd bring a computer up, and they'd have notes across the bottom. And you have it flash, and it was this person has never paid a late fee. Will never bring their movies back on time. We had people that had, they would rent out 12 to 15 movies every Tuesday and bring back 8 of them, because that they were never going to bring back movies. So the corporate would just write them off, which is hilarious because, good customers, they would screw over, but bad customers, they would give reward. So, but us there, we would occasionally go through and if they would give a shitty customer extra free rentals, we'd go through and rent out shit on their and take those free rentals away. Or if they wouldn't return their movies, we'd go through and take the free rentals and re-rent out the movies that they hadn't returned. And so that it would give them 5 days, and then they would come back because they'd be complaining because they're I was told I was getting free rentals. I'm you did on a movie that you on Turner and Hooch that you haven't brought back yet. Also, people would never, ever, ever listen. And we used to put subtitle. This movie contains subtitles on any foreign release movies that we got. So you'd get the DVD, or I was at the end, so I was still at the end of VHS tapes. We still had VHS tapes where DVDs were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But we would sit there and you would get a little sticker that would go on the box, and it's like Cantonese language American English subtitles, and you would have to look at these people and go, this has got subtitles. Yeah, I don't care. And then they would bring it back the next day. Oh, that movie, they're not in English. I'm like, yeah, no shit. We told you it has subtitles. It's literally the sticker on the package. You grab a DVD and, there'd be a big sticker right here that would say, Japanese language or whatever. Or they'd get a movie that was like an art film because it was a new release, and then they would bitch because it was an art film. So I got to the point where it got so bad that I would look at people and they're like, yeah, I'm not renting this to you. And they're like, well, why are you not? I was like, because you're going to bring it back and you're going to complain so you can get your free rental. So I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now, you're not going to like this movie. So, and they're like, well, I want to rent it. I'm like, all right, but I'm not renting it to you. So there's movies that I would take, people bring in their stack, and I'd reach over and grab the one on the top, and I'd throw it off to the side, and they'd be like, well, what was that? And I was like, yeah, I'm not renting you that movie. I was like, because that's a Chinese language movie, and you're going to complain that it's subtitled. Or my favorite is the people who would bring their movies back and complain because it was widescreen. And they didn't understand why they would cut half the movie off the top and the bottom. Because they like full screen. They wanted their full screen movies. And I'm like, you're explaining to them that the widescreen is the whole movie. You get to see it. I was like, okay, what size is your TV? Because this is back in the day before everybody had a widescreen, flat screen TV. This is when everybody still had their little square tube television. So I look at them and go, okay, well, when you go to the theater, how big is the screen? Well, it's rectangular. Now, what shape is your TV? Well, it's square. How do you fit a rectangle inside a square? Well, you got to fit it in the middle, and you got to cut the tops and the bottom off. Needless to say, what was lucky was at one point, was it AMC, I believe, or TMC, Turner Movie Classics or Turner Classic Movies, did a documentary on widescreen movies and why they should be the norm now. And I recorded that, and I would play it all the time on all the TVs at the video store. So people would be like, well, it's cutting the movie off. I'm like, well, hold on a second. This is what you're seeing. So if you want to miss most of the movie, then, pan and scan was horrible back then because you'd only see, they would move the action over here, so you wouldn't see anything that's going on over here, whatnot. So we did a lot of that. Because you'd always be sitting there because you knew who was going to complain about movies. You knew why they were going to complain about movies. You knew the people that were coming in. You had the parents who never watched their children, so their little hellion children would run around and destroy the store, so you'd have to go back through and put everything back that their little kids put wherever. So you always had stupid stuff like that. We had these one family. We had this one dude we used to call him Frankenstein. Him and his wife, who was this dude was 6'8". His wife was 4'2", and their two little hellion children that used to run around and get into everything. We'd have to go back, and they would just sit over there and just pull out movies. And you'd have to go, as soon as they'd leave, you'd go back and put everything back and put everything, because you couldn't say nothing to the parents. The parents were like, "Rrr, rrr." The mom would be like, my kids are fine. And then the dad would just "Rrr, rrr." I mean, literally, we called him Frankenstein, not only because he was tall and he looked like Frankenstein. He literally was like, well, them guys are like, "Rrr, rrr, rrr." So, I know this is bad, because I don't get me wrong, not all of it was bad. There were some really good fun times there. But I want to go back a little further. I want to go back from before I worked at the video store. I want to go back to like 13-year-old Paul, maybe even younger than that. Here in Pickwood, we had Home Video Ventures and Diamond Video. And Diamond Video, the ladies that worked there absolutely loved me as a kid. I would go in there and talk movies, and they would give me like the little magazine things that they came out with that would tell all the new releases of when and what the dates were. All the little, oh, well, this movie's coming, and okay, it's going to be the uncut, where the theatrical was what they showed in the theaters. And, I had stacks of those when I was a kid. They'd give me the old movie posters when they would take them down and move them around or whatever. I was joking around the other day at the shop. I had in my locker in high school. Mind you, how big is a locker? Like this big, rectangular, whatever. I had figured out a way to put 2 movie posters inside my locker. So I had Prison and Slaughterhouse Rock movie posters inside my locker. So one was on the door, turned at the door, went in, and then you had the other ones in the back and around the side. But I had those in my locker because the ladies at the video store gave them to me. I still got some of them posters probably to this day. But we'd always go in there, we'd rent. They never, ever, ever was I ever turned away for a movie. This was funny because I like I said, watching the Last BlockBuster, they were talking about how, you just went in and they were like, all right, whatever. No one ever said, no, you couldn't rent a movie. I think the only thing they, of course they wouldn't let you rent like porn or something like that. But you would literally go in, and I would remember watching like Ilsa, She-Wolf of the SS, or freaking Sorority Babes at the Slime Ball Bolorama, Return of the Living Dead, Eaten Alive, Gator Bait. I watched like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they never said anything. You would just go up there, you would hand them the card, because the thing is you go up there and each VHS tape box, you just had the box with styrofoam in it, and there was a little slip or a little token thing. You'd pull off and you'd take it up front and you'd hand it to the lady. She'd go into the back area, she'd go find that, put the tag in there, pull the movie out, and then bring it out to you. So you would end up watching, you'd have to wait 20 minutes while she went back through there and looked for the movie. So, but no, they never questioned anything. You got to watch whatever you wanted to. And the funny part about it is that at one point, there was a one video store, I think it was Video USA, got in trouble because the guy was renting out bootleg movies back in the day. It was, you know how you get the camcorder ones, the video phone ones and stuff now that, people put on like Pirate Bay and shit like that. Literally, this guy, I don't know how he did it, but he got it because they were putting camcorders, old school VHS camcorders, stick the big freaking tape in, close it, hit record. He would record the movies that way, and then he would make copies of them, and then he was renting them. Because I remember getting a really grainy copy of, was it Rambo 3? At the video store while Rambo 3 was still in theaters. So I remember them getting busted too. That's the funny part. They got that got shut down, and then somebody else bought it, which I think it was the same people. I just think it was one of them ones where they go, okay, well, I sold off the company to this guy. Yeah, I still work here. Yeah, I'm still the manager, but it's sold to a different group of people. But yeah, it was, what was real bad was that video store, they knew when I would come in, I'd always ask for Empire Strikes Back. every time I would go in, it was always Empire Strikes Back, Empire Strikes Back, Empire Strikes Back. I watched stupid Empire Strikes Back forever. and then of course, friend of the family, they had the setup with the multiple VCRs and the stuff. So I rented a Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi one night, took them down there, and they put them all on one VHS tape for me. And I would go home and I would watch freaking Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, and Return of the Jedi over and over and over again on a loop. Oh, excuse me, sorry. And we'd have a blast back then. But the best part about it is, like I said, we would go in there and I burned my way through like the sci-fi section. I burnt my way through the horror section at like every video store in our area. And it's funny because you'd go rent one movie over here at this video store, and you have like Legend of the Werewolf Woman, and then you would see another one over here at this video store, and it was She-Wolf or something like that. And then you watch it, it was the same damn movie, it just renamed with a different box art and stuff like that. But we'd always go through every freaking Friday and Saturday. That was our thing. I would always go to the video store almost every day just to visit, just to talk to the ladies, and made sure that they, like I said, they got used to me. I was there every day pretty much because that was my whole thing. I'd go to the little bookstore. I made my way around everything. The little bookstore, the newsstand, all the video stores, everything. And then when they actually started selling the VHS tapes, at one point I was like, "Oh my God, you're selling these?" Because back in the day, the VHS tapes were like $100 for a VHS tape of any movie when it came out. But after a while, then it was suddenly in the used bin for like $9.99 for a VHS tape, and you're like, oh, I can get a copy of Terminator for $10 on VHS. So you'd save up my money, and I'd go buy a VHS tape, and that's what started my obsession with movies at one point. But then I went through that, and then I got my job, and my first job was working at a grocery store. Our grocery store had a little video section. We had a counter, and we had like a wall, and you had like your little like things in there, and you had the tapes in there, and you'd bring them up, and we'd swap them out behind the counter and stuff like that. What was funny, because that was there when I started working there, and before I think it only lasted like 2 years, but like every place at one point had a video rental department. Like the Kroger's here in town had it, our grocery store had it, Allberg's had it. Pretty much any place that thought they could make money off of VHS tapes sold or rented VHS tapes. So, I started doing that. I was like, man, this would be great. But I always try to get a job working at every video store in town. I ended up getting the job years later at Hollywood Video. I don't know if anybody remembers Hollywood Video. It was the second largest video store chain in the nation and the worst paid. They treated their employees like shit. Blockbuster had the blue and gold. Hollywood Video had purple. So so you have to wear these purple freaking button-down shirts. You had to wear your lanyards that said because you weren't managers, assistant managers. So you were directors, assistant director, shift leader, and then down the line. It was, to say the least, like I said, it was some really fun times and some really, really bad times. While I worked there, I had like people threaten to fight me. I had people threaten to fight my employees. I had, people who call us up and cuss us out on the phone all the time. just because, what was funny was, this goes back to Hollywood Video had a service that would call you when a movie was late. And it had a Sean Connery impersonator telling you your movies were late. Um, so people would call us up and, hey, Sean Connery told me and I returned that movie, blah, blah, blah. And you'd go look it up and it would say it was not released. So you'd always have to go over to the shelf, look through the shelf to see if that movie was there, check it. Because sometimes what it is, you're scanning hundreds of movies a day and you're scanning it and it just, you do it out of habit, you might have missed it. Somebody scanned it, scanned it but didn't scan it in. So you go, okay, we found your movie, blah blah blah, whatever. We take it off. We go in immediately, take it off their account, and whatnot, and then refund take their charges off and whatnot. But pretty much that was like 2 out of 8 times, 2 out of 10 times. So the other 8 times their movie was not there because they still had it out and they just didn't. They would do everything they could to keep from having to pay the late fees, which no one ever paid late fees anyways, because people would just bitch and complain that they didn't have late fees until we just wanted to keep the lines going, which is go, okay, no late fees, whatever, take them off the system. So, you'd have to go through that. You tell them, hey, the movie's not here. I had one lady, she was sitting there, her movie wasn't there. And I was like, hey, your movie's not here. Well, yes, it is. I'm like, well, ma'am, it's not here. I don't know what to tell you. I've looked everywhere. I checked, everywhere. I was like, okay. We had a family video here in town at the exact same time. And one of the problems was occasionally people would drop off family video tapes to Hollywood Video and Hollywood Video tapes to family video because they'd rent a shit ton of movies at the same time and would drop them all off without thinking about them. Or they drop off movies without putting the movies back in a case, or DVDs without putting them in a case, or whatever. So this lady calls us up, complains. She's like, hey, I returned this movie. I'm like, ma'am, I'm sorry, the movie's not here. And she goes, well, I returned it. I'm like, well, did you rent from Family Video? And she's like, yes. I'm like, could you have accidentally have taken it to and dropped it off at Family Video? No. I'm like, oh, okay, I know things happen, whatever. I was like, you might want to call and double check. Well, that's not my job to take care of. And I'm like, well, it's not my job to take care of your loss. And so this woman's starting to get angry. And I'm like, I'm trying to be cool. I'm trying to be calm. And she's just getting madder. And finally she starts going, she goes, well, somebody there's a thief. You guys are steal. That's all you guys ever do. I'm always getting movies missing. You're all just a bunch of thieves. I'm like, okay, ma'am. I was like, I need you to call the police and have them come down. And if we're all thieves, you need to have us arrested. And she's like, what? I was like, if we're all thieves and we're all stealing from you, then you need to contact the police department and have the police come down and, because we're stealing from you. I didn't say that. I'm like, you literally just said that we're all thieves, that one of us stole it. And I'm like, I'm just saying, ma'am, I was like, you might want to check there. And, long story short, I think it was at Family Video or it was at the one in Troy, because we'd also have people who would rent from the neighboring town, and they would rent, because if you had a Hollywood Video card, you could use the Hollywood Video card at any Hollywood Video in the nation. And we get a lot of people who would buy movies on the road because they were, in a motorhome or whatever, and they would try to return a movie that they bought in Pawtucket, Rhode Island, at our store in Pickle, Ohio. And we would have to accept it, even though we did not sell that to them, because it was part of the Hollywood Video chain. So that was always fun. But, so I'm sitting there, we had to deal with this woman, get her all calmed down. But and then you would get the ones that would just fucking just excuse me, you're sitting there and this woman's like sitting there calls me up, and I'm trying to be calm and cool, and she's just cussing me out. She's like, I don't owe fucking late fees. I don't owe you. You're just that's fucking robbery. Whatever. You're just trying to scam money from people. And I'm like, ma'am, I was like, literally, you rented out 10 movies on Tuesday. 5 of them were returned. You still have 5 of them. You still have out 4 of them from the following week before that. And she's like, I've returned all those movies. I'm like, you have never returned a movie on time, ever. It's listed on, I didn't say that. It wasn't listed. But there were notes in there. The notes was like, these people have never returned a movie. And she's like, she starts going, fuck you, you're telling me. I'm like, all of a sudden, I had it. I just couldn't deal with this woman in there. Where I'm like, listen, bitch, you need to stop fucking calling me and deal with this because I'm too fucking busy. Click. 2 seconds later, boom, how dare you call me a bitch? I'm like, you're calling me a piece of shit, telling me I'm a fucking idiot, all this stuff like that. I call you a bitch. Suddenly, I'm the bad guy. So I'm like, whatever, bitch. Hung up the phone. So I immediately call corporate. Immediately after hanging up the phone, I call corporate. I'm like, hey, I just had an irate lady on the phone. She might be calling you, because she was cussing me out on the phone, something fierce. I was like, so I'm having a feeling that she's going to be upset and try to like get her late because she doesn't return movies on time. And literally, I found out if you preemptively struck against horrible customers, 90% of the time the corporate would back you. If you couldn't call corporate, say you were dealing with a customer and then you had to deal with a customer after that, and then you couldn't get to the phone immediately to call corporate, and that person would immediately go home and call corporate, you're screwed because they're going to give them the works. They're going to give them 10 free rentals. They're going to give them a free bucket of popcorn or whatever. But I found out that if you went in and you went, hey, I just had an irate customer in here, and I have a feeling they're going to call corporate, usually they would back us, which was funny because it's like the only time they ever backed us as employees. We had, what was funny because the same line that you could call and complain about was the same line you could call to praise. And when I went into that store, they had never had a customer compliment. I got customer compliments, and the worst part about it is we got so many customer compliments that they didn't believe that they were customer compliments were real. They were thinking they were fake, that we were, as employees, were calling the customer corporate line and praising ourselves. I'm like, no, we would just tell people, I'm like, hey, if we're doing a good job, call this number and tell us. So, and, it was, we'd have customers who really liked us. Like, we had one customer, she would come in, and every week, we would, she would just praise how good we did. So she would every week call, like, hey, these people went out of their way to try to find the movie. It may not have had the movie that I wanted, but they tried to find it, stuff like that. And she would call every week to tell how good we were. And so literally she kept popping up on the thing, and so they thought it was fake. They thought, like I said, that we were calling them in for ourselves. I'm like, why would we do that using the exact same name at, I don't know. It's one of them things that we as a company, they never wanted to back their employee. I remember getting into an argument with one of our district managers, and I looked at him. I was like, that every other video store pays almost double the hour for an assistant manager than what I'm currently making. Because I was making garbage. I'm not going to go into that, but I was making garbage as an assistant manager. I was literally working. At one point, the only reason I got a day off was the manager and I would pick one day. I would open and close one day, and he'd open and close one day. And that way he would get the day off that I opened and closed, and then I would get off the day he opened and closed. So we're working, you know, six days a week, all into overtime. And then they would complain because we're getting overtime. But they wouldn't hire anybody because they were in a hiring freeze. So they would tell us to send all the people home to make us work, but they didn't want to pay us for being there, which was always fun. So it was Hollywood Video. It was that, you know, literally they were one of the first ones to go. So when Netflix started dragging people outside and shooting them in the face, luckily Hollywood Video was one of the first ones to go. Oh, by the way, if anybody ever went to Hollywood Video, they sold your information. When you logged in to get an account, to get a card, and you had to put your information in, they took that and they immediately sold it. They sold everybody who ever had a card at Hollywood Video, your information got sold. So, which is funny because the company don't even exist anymore because it all went bankrupt because they owed so many people so much money. It was ridiculous. But yeah, they definitely, they sold your information to, yeah. So see, I can tell you all this stuff now because, you know, company don't exist, so whatever. But it was funny because you'd have people come in and, you know, you'd always have the people like, my kid can't rent out on a card. My kid can't rent out on a card because you can't. You'd have the listing and like, okay, I have 3 kids. This kid's 16. This kid's 14. This kid's 12. You know, the oldest and the next oldest can rent rated R movies. The next one can't. And then you would sit there, and then they would send that kid, the 12-year-old, to go rent movies. And then when you wouldn't allow the kid to rent, you know, a rated R movie, then the parents would call and complain because you didn't let their kid rent a rated R movie, and now they had to drive all the way back because they would just send their kid on their bike or walking or whatever. And then if they have to drive over there, and you're like, well, can I do it over the phone? No, you can't okay anything over the phone because you could just be the older brother or sister telling them that their, you know, their little brother can rent rated R movies. So we'd always have to have the parent come in. Or you get the parent who would put their kid on a card and their kids could never take a movie back and bring a movie back on time or bring a movie back at all. And, you know, you'd have the parents come in and they're like, okay, you know, I'm renting these movies. And they're like, oh, you've got $12 in late fees. And they're like, oh, okay. I literally have not used this card in like a year. And I'm like, well, you know, John was in here 3 days ago. And they're like, and they would complain and they would have them have you take their kid off their, you know, rental. And then, you know, 6 months down the line, they'd call you up and tell you to put their kid, you know, or show up, tell you to put their kid back on there because their kids couldn't rent movies. And they would want to send their kid over to pick up a movie for them. And then when they get there, their kid can't rent a movie. Which was always ridiculous. My favorite one was the people who would come in and have like 5 accounts at the same video store under, like, you know, okay, you'd pull up their name and you're like, oh, you know, my name's John Smith. You pull up John Smith and you're like, oh, what's your address? And they're like, okay, you owe $78 in late fees. Oh, no, try the other account. The other John Smith, John A. Smith. Okay, you owe $46 in late fees on John A. No. Put John A. Smith at this address. Okay, you owe $12 in late fees. Oh, no. It's under my wife's name. So Deborah Smith. Oh yeah, she owes $1 late fee. Oh, I'll pay that. You know, you get that because you just keep having them put, you know, multiple accounts just so they wouldn't have to pay their late fees. But I just read the other day that somebody got like really in trouble because they had never returned a VHS copy of Sabrina the Teenage Witch to the video store, and they like they owed like $20,000 or something stupid like that. That reminds me, we had a guy. I remember this happening. This is what's funny. I hadn't been at the pickle store long. We had this guy come in and he had his credit statement because he was trying to buy a house, and it said he owed like $1,200 because he had never returned a copy of a movie called Novocaine, which was, I think, Steve Martin movie, I believe, and he had never returned it. And the guy's like, dude, I don't know whatever happened to this movie at all. And he's like looking at the paperwork, and it's like, they're telling me that I owe like $1,200 because this movie's been out for like 4 years. And I'm like, all right, let's see what I can do, whatever. So I go pull up the movie, and of course that copy of the tape is not in the store. It has never been in the store because we did you do a quarterly, and then you do a twice a year full inventory of everything. But literally, the movie had not showed up in the 4 years, whatever. So I'm like, okay. So I went in the back. This is like when we still had VHS tapes for sale. I found a copy of it on VHS tape. I went through, printed the sticker, put the sticker on the tape, scanned it in, wiped out a $1,200 late fee, and it wouldn't let me wipe it all out. It let me like wipe out like 99.9%. So the guy owed like $1.20, something like that. So the guy paid it. It took it off there, and I would do stuff like that. But the guy was super nice about it because he wasn't one of these guys who was like, "Ah, fuck, this is bullshit. I don't know this fucking company a goddamn thing." Rah. And 90% of the time, if you came in and I looked at you and I rang you up and I went, "Oh, you got $4 in late fees," and you're like, "Oh man, I didn't know I had late fees. Shit. Can I put a movie back or something?" I'd go, "Hold on. Late fees are gone." Kicked it out the door. No problem. If you come in here and you hand me a stack of movies like this high, and I scan your card and it's like you owe $15 in late fees, and you're like, "I don't know shit. Those movies were returned on time." Dude, I'm not wiping out shit. You're nice to me, I'll be nice to you. And see, a lot of people, that's one of the problems with a lot of like service industry, retail, stuff like that. The whole customer is always right. No, the customer is not always right. The customer can be an asshole sometimes. So let's put it that way. But it was one of the ones where if you're nice to us and you treat us with respect, we would do nice stuff for you. I had a guy who could never return a movie on time. He would return his movies. Every Tuesday, he'd rent between 10 and 15 new releases. And he'd bring probably 8 of them back within the first 5 days. And then like a few days later, he'd bring the rest of them back. But he'd always come up and he's like, "Yeah, I got late fees. I haven't returned these movies." I was like, "Okay, let's re-rent that back out so that it's only going to cost you $1. So you don't have to worry about it." And we would help people. That's the only thing people didn't understand is if you come in and you, like I said, treat us with respect, we would treat you with respect, and you'd be all hooked up. Whatever. But then you had the other way. You had the extreme other way. We had this one guy come in. We had a little girl working for it with us, and she told him had late fees. And the kid didn't want to pay late fees. And then he's like, "Well, I don't want to pay them. Can I get this movie?" And they're like, he goes, "Oh, that's on my brother or my mom or whatever." And we're like, "Okay," because sometimes we do that. They're like, "Oh, that's my wife's late fees or my kid's late fees. They'll take care of it." Okay. So this guy was like, "Well, I'm not paying those. Those are somebody else's late fees on our account." And they're like, "Okay." So we go to rent the movie, and it's rated R. Well, he's not listed as being able to rent on his parents' account. And we're like, "Well, you're not even on this account to rent, And he's like, "Well, that's bullshit. My parents said I could rent on, And I'm like, it is what it is. We can't rent to you." And he's getting up in this little girl. I mean, this dude's probably, I'd say probably still in high school, but he's probably, a good 6 foot tall. And this girl's maybe 5'2", maybe weighs a buck 05, if that. And he starts getting up there and he's like, nostrils flaring, yelling at her, going, "Listen, bitch, I'm gonna." And I walk over, I'm like, "Dude, you step up, just go outside. This is ridiculous." And he goes like, "Oh man, you're clowning on us, man. You're bullshit." And we're like, "Whatever, man. You need to go outside. You can't be threatening people." And he continued to threaten. We're like, "All right, do. Called the cops." And I was like, "Dude, you can't be here. You can't be here when the cops show up." And that dude stood there, threatening everybody in the store until the cop showed up. The cop showed up. His parents showed up, and we're sitting there and we're like, because the parents are getting mad at us. I'm like, you can't threaten people. This is ridiculous. You can't threaten to beat people up. You especially can't be, threatening to beat up a girl, in a when you're twice her size. It's ridiculous. And the cops let the kid go on to the parents, and it was one of them things. And he was never allowed back in because it was listed. If this kid comes back in the store, call the cops because we're not dealing with it. Like I said, one of the few times that was another one of the few times that the company actually backed us. I was lucky enough. I had this guy start giving me shit one time, and he starts threatening me, and I'm like, "Dude, I don't know what to tell you. Your movie's not here. Oh, it's, bullshit. Blah, blah, blah. He, is probably fucking back here." And I'm like, "Dude," I was like, "I just checked. I went through it. It's not here." And he starts getting up and he starts talking shit. And he's like, "Beat your ass, man." And I'm like, I had just had it. I'm like, "All right, whatever." I walked over. I start unbuttoning my work shirt and I start clocking out. And he goes, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Dude," I was like, "if we're going to go outside and fight, I got to clock out because I can't beat your ass on the clock. I'll get fired. I can go beat your ass on my time." And just the whole, his face and everything just changed. And I'm not gonna lie. At that point, I hadn't been a fight in years upon years. And I didn't really want to fight, but I called his bluff. So it's, this guy went from being the like, "Oh, fuck you guys, blah, blah, bullshit, I'll kick your ass, blah, blah." And as soon as you walked around the counter as not an employee but as another person, that shit ground to a halt, like stopped right there. And they're like, "All right, come on, let's go outside." And the dude's like, "Oh no, I'm just messing with you, man. I'm just messing with you." I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And he took off, got in his car, and drove off. I don't think he ever came back, at least while I was working. So I think I called his bluff. So, but you'd have stupid stuff like that. You also had, really good employees, and you had shit employees, and you had other coworkers like that, you get along with, and you have coworkers that you couldn't stand. I'd look at them and go, "Yeah, I'm not working with them. You can put them on another shift." I had one coworker, and everybody knew he smoked weed. Everybody. And it wasn't like it was, whatever. But I'm like sitting there one day, and he was supposed to come in. I was the first one in, so I opened up the store. He was supposed to be in at 10. I was there from 9 to 10 by myself. And I'm sitting there, and I have luckily, a customer who knew me. He goes, "Hey man, your dude's outside smoking weed in his car." And I went, "What?" And I look out there, and he's smoking weed in the car. And I walk out there, and I'm like, knock on his window. I'm like, "Dude, you can't smoke weed in the parking lot and then come to work. Go ahead and take today off because you're sick." "Well, I'm not sick, man." I'm like, "No, you're sick. Go home." "Nah, man, I'm fine." no, you're sick. Go home. And he goes, well, I'm not sick. I'm like, well, because if you're smoking weed while you're at work, I gotta fire you. So I think you're sick today. And it took him, I guarantee you, it felt like 10 minutes before he was finally like, oh yeah, man, I don't feel good. I'm going to go home. I'm like, okay, go home. And then I had to call around to make sure I could bring another employee in to cover him. And I had to look at him like, dude, I don't care if you smoke weed before you get to work. Don't smoke weed in a parking lot at work. That does not look good. Especially when people inside are watching you smoke weed outside, and then you come in smoking, stinking of weed. So, we had shit like that. Well, this goes to me. I'm sitting there, and at the time, I was selling like movie posters and stuff like that. Well, I had the guy who was selling them on eBay for me who owed me a ton of money. And so I ended up getting a bunch, like I don't even know how many swords. I know this is a weird thing. He paid me in other stuff so I could flip those and make some of my money back on what he owed me because he just couldn't get caught up. So I took, I don't know, probably 20 swords. This is like katanas and long swords and short swords and rapiers and stuff like that. And this is all literally on the back seat of my car. So I'm sitting there and I'm working the register and I'm talking like this. And one of my regular customers is sitting there and he keeps peeking behind me and he goes, is that your car outside? And I'm like, which one? And he goes like, I don't know what I had at the time. I was like a blue Escort. And I was like, a blue Escort. And I kind of look and there's a cop just staring in my car. And I'm like, oh, okay, what the hell? So I finished up my customer. I get him out the door. And I have, by this time, there's people still working there. So I run outside and I walk up to the cop and I'm like, hey, can I help you? And he's like, do you know whose car this is? I went, well, it's mine. I was like, can I help you with anything? And he goes, what's with all these swords in the back seat of the car? And I'm like, and I'm thinking he's joking. I looked at him as a straight face. I'm like, ninjas. And he just looks at me and he looks at me and he goes, is that really necessary? You need all them swords in the back of the car? And I'm like, didn't know that was illegal. I was like, I didn't know that was an issue. So, and he's like, well, I just think it's kind of weird. You have a back seat full of swords. And I'm like, okay, that's, I was like, I had a guy who owed me money and he gave me the swords to make up for some of the money he owed me so that I could sell the swords and make up the money myself. And the cop was just like, yeah. I don't want to see them in the backseat of that car if I come through here again. I'm like, okay. They're not like carry concealed. They're not even real swords. They're, like display swords or whatever. And I'm like, all right, whatever. So when the cop left, I went and threw them in the trunk, which I believe makes them a concealed weapon. But, I don't know the law. But, I always thought that was hilarious. And mind you, we were in a plaza too. So we're like the last store in a plaza. Well, the funny part about it is next door was a Subway, and then across the parking lot was a Speedway. Well, we would get tired, so we'd sit there and we would go and we would make deals with the people at Speedway and Subway to give them free rentals if we got free food. So that's literally probably why to this day I cannot eat Subway food, because I ate so many Subway sandwiches while I worked at Hollywood Video. It was ridiculous. Because you're like, okay, well, they got free subs when they're tired of eating them too. So they would give us the free subs and we'd give them free rentals. And you just end up eating tons of the little roller hot dogs and and hot corn dogs and fountain sodas or Subway sandwiches because they were free. And like I said, Hollywood Video paid shit at the time, so you tend to get a lot of that stuff. But the one thing is that was cool. You know, like I said, it was not all bad. There's a lot of good. One of the good things is that I had a lot of really good employees while I was working there. A lot of people who would, bust their butt, and I taught them. I was like, hey, I don't care if you guys goof off. I don't care if you joke around. I don't care if you laugh. I was like, as long as all the work's done before we leave. And it was I trained them with the carrot instead of the stick. The carrot got us far more better employees than the stick ever got. So, you would have really good employees, but of course, then sometimes some of the horseplay would get a little overzealous sometimes, and we'd do mean stuff. Like I had one employee that was afraid of two things: clowns and spiders. So if I knew they were going to work, I would go through and I would find like killer clowns. I would find, arachnophobia, because it had the clown on the front, and then on the back it had the spider form of it. And I would always make them put those movies back, and they would always yell at me and throw movies at me and stuff like that. We would do stupid stuff like when we worked there, you were only supposed to watch G-rated movies. You're supposed to watch Disney movies, which we were like, yeah, that sucks. I'm not watching Disney movies over and over and over again. And of course, sometimes you would, whatever. But we'd have stupid stuff like we'd have Monkey Movie Mondays, and we watch movies with monkeys in them. Even though monkey is wrong because it was his ape movies, we watched like Planet of the Apes. We watched like Dunstan Checks In, MVP, stuff like that. King Kong. But what was really fun was I had a girl named Mary Kate and I had a girl named Ashley, who never, ever, ever, ever worked the same shift because one of them was a college student who'd only come back every once in a while during the holidays or, during breaks, whatever, to make a little extra money while they were on break. One glorious day, they both worked. So it was Mary Kate and Ashley Day. So we watched all the god-awful Mary Kate and Ashley movies because it was the day when both Mary Kate and Ashley were there. So we'd make them, we would have fun with it. We really would. I'm not gonna lie. One time I wasn't supposed to be there the next morning. I got called in because there was nobody to cover, so I had to literally open up after only you got to be there at 9 o'clock in the morning. I left at 1 o'clock the night before, and I didn't go directly home. I think we went out and hung out and had drinks and stuff like that. So I probably got home like 3 o'clock in the morning. Probably didn't go to bed till about 4. And I get a call at 20 to 9, telling me that there's nobody that can work, that I need to get in there. And I'm like, crap. So I get in there, and as an assistant manager or manager, you get in an hour before. You get in there at 9. When you open at 10, and then 10 to 11, you're the only one there. It depends on the day, because on weekends you would have people there before. But you release there from 9 to 10 by yourself. So I go in there, and the office is way off to the side. At the time, I was working at the Troy store. So you had the counter up front, and then you had the office off to the far left. So I get all the drawers in. I get everything done. I got it's 9:40, and I'm like, all right. So I go in the office, and I sit there, and I put my head in my hands and try to get a breather, and all of a sudden I start hearing bam, 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 bam. I come up, I look around, it's 20 after 10. I had fallen asleep for 40 minutes, and I'm like, shit. And I run over, and I can see people out in the parking lot beating on the glass. and people that my employees are out there beating on the glass, and I come around and I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, our computers were down. I couldn't open up until the computers were up and running. My apologies. And I unlock the door and I get my employees in. I start getting everything else. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to screw up. I guess if you're going to screw up stupid so that you can cover your ass. So, the couple of the best times were when we would do the overnight, which is you would go when the store closed at midnight. We would have to get as many employees as we could working. We'd have the employees that would come in the morning. It was the only ones that couldn't be there because you'd have to have like 6 people in there working, and you have to scan every movie and every item to account for inventory. You're there till super, super late. But we'd sit in there and we would hook it up and we'd put like CDs in and we'd listen to music all night and scan movies. And one night we're sitting there and we were listening. They had all the speakers hooked up. We had adjusted everything, so we got really good sound. And like a bunch of us were metal guys, so we're sitting there listening to like, I don't know, like Slipknot or something like that, or whatever. We're listening to some heavy metal band, and this is 2:33 in the morning. We're back there joking around, laughing, scanning stuff, listening to music, not paying a bit of attention. All of a sudden we start hearing boom, 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 boom. And we look over and there's this cop standing there beating on the glass. And we're like, okay. So we go over and open up the doors. He goes, you guys need to turn that down. We're getting noise complaints because the music's too loud. And we're like, oh, we're sorry. So we have to go over and turn everything down. And as soon as the cops were away, we cranked everything back up. But those were fun because literally you're sitting in there. It's just the employees. It's just kind of whatever you want to do. As long as you're scanning movies to make sure, and scanning product to make sure it's in. You know, it's one of them nights. Yeah, you're busting your butt because it's one of them ones when as soon as you're done, you can get the hell out of there. But one of the last times I was there was some screw up. And I was still there when the crew came in the next morning. So we never left. And I looked at him, I was like, I'm supposed to be back in here. I was like, I'm freaking tired. I'm not going to get in right away. So I left at like 10 after 9 in the morning, and I had to be back to work at like 5 o'clock that night. Luckily, I got my hours pushed back, so I didn't have to come in until like 8 and finish out the last 4 hours. But you know, it's the video store. Like I said, was fun, and one of the best things was all the free rentals and getting to rent stuff before it hit the shelves. You'd always have a 1 week. So when a movie dropped on Tuesday, we got the next week's shipment that Tuesday. So that gives us time to scan everything in, put it in the system, and then have it ready to go to put on the shelf Monday when you would close. So it'd be ready first thing Tuesday morning. But you'd get to rent it for that full solid week before it would come out, before everybody else would get it. But I'm a horror movie guy, so there was so much stuff. I was just, I watched thousands of horror movies while I was there. It's literally like, okay, this movie sucked. Oh well, I'm not out nothing. So the thing was you could watch them up to that first week, and then you couldn't watch them again until like a month later. So you had like if you didn't watch it that first week, you had to wait a month. So, it was, you get free video rentals, free this, free that, and you got discounts on purchases and whatnot, which was kind of cool. But they go, well, that's part of your pay. And I'm like, well, I'd rather have money. I'd rather be able to live. So I'd rather not be poor. So, and they weren't really good at telling you when you had vacation time either. I ended up having vacation, and I went to go use it. I was like, man, shouldn't I have vacation time yet? And they're like, well, we got to look into that. And they're like, oh yeah, you get a week's paid vacation, but it expires in 3 days. I'm like, what? I was like, I asked you like a month ago that if I had vacation time coming up, and then I couldn't take it off. Then they wouldn't give me the 3 days. I was like, well, I'm just going to take at least get 3 days of my paid vacation. I was like, since I'm not going to draw, well, you can't have those 3 days because I'm like, what? Okay, whatever. And one of the cool things about it was you got paid for holiday pay no matter what. So if you worked it or you didn't work it, you still got paid for that day. Well, if you worked it, you got time and a half. If it was Christmas or Thanksgiving, I believe, you got double time. So, like several times a year, you get, triple time on your paycheck. And I'm like, yeah, I worked every holiday. The only day we closed was Christmas at that point. I worked every Christmas Eve. I worked every Thanksgiving. I worked every Easter. I worked every 4th of July. Anything that I can make a little extra money, I would do. But I've got a lot more stories though, but I am going to call it a night. I'm just sitting here rambling on and on and on, and I hate doing this by myself. But I forgot to say, tonight's episode was brought to you by RU Game, the best comic book video collectible shop in all of Piqua, Ohio, and brought by our new show, Saturday Morning Serials. You can check us out on Facebook. Check us out at Group Therapy TV. And you can check us out at Saturday Morning Serials, brought to you by Group Therapy TV on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. What we're doing is I host Saturday morning cartoons, and we're still getting closer because we're still giving away some stuff. We're just a handful of people away on YouTube of giving away a copy of our DC medals. But you can follow us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on Instagram. Oh yeah, I was going to review some books. So give me 1 second here. All right. Here's some of my reviews for this week. Boom. Steak number 2. Steak is a really fun. I would say it's a black and white comic, but there are like a third color here and there, or but it exists in a universe where vampires are out and they want to be considered right along with everybody else. But you have the two different groups. You have the people who love the vampires and you have the people who hate the vampires, and then you have the school of people who work policing the vampires, and this is all about that. All right. Here's the book that works and that should not work, which is Savage Avengers, which is the Marvel Conan team-up book. This issue is Conan and Spider-Man, but Conan teams up with the Rhino to rob a bank because he's Conan and he's plundering. It's funny. It's a book. It shouldn't work, but it does. Here's one of my new good picks, Shadecraft. The first issue was hot. This is the second issue. It just dropped. It's about essentially a girl haunted by ghosts. The ghost appears to her as her own shadow, which is the ghost of her brother. It's a fun book so far. Image has been knocking it out of the ballpark with some of these new horror comics they're put out. I hate to classify this as horror, but it is a supernatural type book, but I really enjoy that. Here we go. Boom. Vader, probably one of the best Star Wars comics going right now. Probably tied or really close because back and forth. So Bounty Hunters and Darth Vader are probably the top 2 Star Wars books right now, and I couldn't tell you which is the top. But this is great. It's Vader dealing with the fact that the Emperor basically sent people to destroy him at one point. And as always, remember, you need to check your previews at your local comic book store because, boom, Masters of the Universe Revelations comic book is in the order book this month. So you can order that. You can order your book that way. Your local comic book shop cannot miss your book. Like right now with everybody wants Batman Fortnite. If you pre-order that, you would have Batman Fortnite. So there is that. So that just gets your books that you want to get early and make sure you get them. So, okay, now I'm going to call it a night. Sorry about that. But like I said, like and subscribe. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Watch us on YouTube. Listen to us on Podbean or wherever you listen to the podcast. And you guys have a great night because the cat's coming to visit. Isn't that right, Lucy? Ow. Cat is never not in heat. So have a good night. Take care, everybody.